and that was, well, a year ago. Well, there's more about epidemiology and pathophysiology. What does the aquatic environment provide us more? It's some very important nutrients. Ben Balzer had a poster presentation yesterday about iodine and brain development, how important it is for brain development to consume enough iodine. It's related to IQ. Well, iron, we've been hearing a lot about iron today. Iron is also very important. Selenium, well, I haven't heard a presentation about it, but it's also very important for us. Not to mention vitamins A and D, and of course omega-3 fatty acids. Moreover, DHA is the most important fatty acid in the human brain. So, well, we had the discussion with Lord Cordain, and he had a paper about it some years ago, and he said LCP for brain expansion, because DHA is very abundant in the brain, it could also derive from a scavenged brain. Well, that's possible, of course, but as most of you know, well, if you can imagine, who needs most of the LCP for a developing brain? That's not the man scavenging on the savannah. That is the pregnant woman who is not scavenging at the savannah, who is waiting at her husband at home. And especially the infant who has his brain spurt just shortly after birth also needs a lot of DHA. So either they go on the savannah, which is unlikely, which has not been proven in present hunter-gatherers, or those men have to bring back those LCP. Well, that's a blubbery brain, all those kilometers from the place where they scavenge an animal. Well, I have heard a story about a long-distance runner from Professor Lieberman, but I'm not sure if they were experienced in long-distance running with a blubbery brain in their hands. Well, but what is the solution? Again, women can collect shellfish, can collect fish at seashores, at lake shores, and those are also very rich sources of omega-3 and LCP. So what we did is, in the paper I was already talking about with Ethan, Crawford and Cordain, we made a model for what if we include 33% aquatic foods in a Paleolithic diet. Well, we used some constraints for that model because, of course, well, it has been said before, 35% of protein is a maximum level. Linoleic acid, La here, means it's, where it is, there. It should be at least 1% of energy. And well, we said it can only be locally available foods, so foods from the East African ecosystem. The plant-animal ranges, we range between 30 and 70, but the amount of fish and animal within that models could range from 0 to 100%. So where did we end up with that? Well, actually it was quite the same, and maybe some of you have read the paper. It's the last assumption, or the last estimation we made of a Paleolithic diet with Cordain. It's about the same numbers you know from his earlier papers. The only thing is we now included long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids. And the interesting thing was in these diets they were consumed in gram amounts. Well, that's a little bit different from what we are advised by the nutritional boards nowadays. And a second thing is that linoleic acid was very low. So, well, the interesting result, and we wanted to prove this in Africa, was we had high LCP intakes and very low linoleic acid intakes. But what does the facts from the floor tell us? So we went to Africa. This is what I did. I drove my car all the way from Cape Town, well, finally back to Amsterdam, but we did a lot of stops. We were looking for hunter-gatherers. Well, these guys, of course. But yeah, I am myth-busting today, so I can tell you those guys are not here anymore. I found some, and they said, I can redress for you if you pay me. Yeah, so probably his food wasn't that traditional either. So we continued. We went from South Africa, where this is from Botswana actually, where we met this guy, not these guys. We went further on to Tanzania, and in Tanzania, we had the same problem. The Hadzabe, they were living traditional, but every tribe had their own anthropologist, and they had their own food supply from local tourists, and if it wasn't food, it was alcohol. So we had a lot of difficulty finding real traditional people. So in the end, we decided we'd try to find people who show parts of a traditional lifestyle. So for example, the pastoralists, some agriculturists, they practice agriculture, but they're still eating a lot of local fish from the local lakes. The same for hunter-gatherers. They also have some, well, natural traditions. For example, they walk around, well, half naked, who has ever seen the Hadzabe. So from this combination of tribes in Africa, we try to reconstruct our Paleolithic diet. Well, for example, we collected milk samples. We did 2 papers on that, and you can see that's a lot of people. This was for examination of the amount of fish. Like I told you, 35%, we wanted to prove that. So we used DHA as a proxy for fish consumption. And what we saw is that, I shall start with DHA, indeed, in the populations where we sampled, we found very high contents of DHA in the milk, proving that they were eating a lot of fish, and also that's, well, it's physiologically possible to have very high concentration of DHA in the milk just by eating it. The other thing was, and that were only a few tribes that were not yet using cooking oil for frying or for whatever, and those people indeed had very low concentrations of linoleic acid in their milk. So this is another myth. We saw that Paleolithic intakes of linoleic acid were very low, not only from the reconstruction, as I showed you before in the paper with Cordain, but also proven by the milk of the people who were not yet eating vegetable oils. Well, nevertheless, the American Health Association is advising us to consume over 10% of linoleic acid. So, well, that's not really the same as a Paleolithic diet contained, probably. Well, that's what I was talking about at a congress with a friend of mine, Chris Ramsden, and he said he did a meta-analysis on the subject, and he said, do you know where the recommendations from the American Health Association derive from? He said they derive from studies which have been performed with PUFA. That's a combination of alpha-linoleic and linoleic acid, and he excluded all the studies that contained both of these, and he showed that if you were just eating more alpha-linoleic acid, that's also a PUFA, then indeed you had a lower cardiovascular disease risk. While you only took the linoleic acid trials, you actually had a borderline higher risk of cardiovascular disease. So these recommendations from the American Heart Association are quite biased by using, well, the wrong studies to say something about linoleic acid, while you actually used a combination of alpha-linoleic and linoleic acid. Well, that's an important difference. Well, as most of you know, also the present high intakes of linoleic acid interfere with the chain elongation from alpha-linoleic acid to its long chain metabolites, EPA and DHA. So that's another disadvantage of eating these high amounts of linoleic acid. So this myth is also busted. Linoleic acid, for me, it's not healthy. So what did we do further? We also collected more strong status parameters. Besides milk, we collected erythrocytes from these people from the different locations I was showing you. Well, that's what we did because we wanted to show the difference with the physiological pregnancy in Western countries. Well, what do we consider normal in a Western pregnancy? For everybody, well, most people probably won't know, but biomagnification means that if you take blood from the mother and her child at delivery, you will find that the infant has a higher erythrocyte DHA status compared to his mother. Well, in other words, the infant is more important during pregnancy. It attracts